Detachment is power, and this is something most people fail to understand when they find themselves desperate to bring someone back into their lives. Right now, your emotions are leading the way, and that's exactly why you feel stuck. You want answers. You want closure. You want them to realize what they lost and come running back, confessing their regret. But here's the truth. People do not return when they feel you're waiting for them. They return when they feel they've lost something they can't replace. When you stop caring, it doesn't mean you become cold or indifferent. It means you take back control over your emotions and refuse to let someone else's actions dictate your sense of self-worth. Right now, you're attached to an outcome. You want them to come back. You want them to realize their mistake. You want them to feel what you feel. But the more you cling to this desire, the more it slips through your fingers. The energy of attachment is desperate, anxious, and heavy. It sends a message that you are incomplete without them, and that's exactly what pushes them further away. People don't respond to desperation. They respond to confidence, certainty, and self-respect. Imagine for a moment that you're standing in the ocean, holding onto a handful of sand. If you grip it too tightly, what happens? The sand slips through your fingers. But if you hold it loosely, it stays. This is how energy works in relationships. When you try too hard to hold on, when you overanalyze every move, when you keep reaching out, checking their social media, looking for signs, you're suffocating the energy between you. They can feel it even if you don't say a word, and that's why they pull away. But the moment you detach, everything changes. When you stop checking, stop waiting, stop needing, the energy shifts. Suddenly, you become the one who is in control. Your emotions are no longer at the mercy of someone else's choices. You step into your own power. And that is when the dynamic reverses. They start wondering why you're no longer reacting, why you're no longer reaching out, why you seem unbothered, even if deep down you're still healing. That curiosity is what makes them start thinking about you again. You have to understand something. People only value what they feel they might lose. If they believe you're still waiting, still available, still emotionally attached, there's no urgency for them to return. But when they sense distance, when they realize they no longer have guaranteed access to you, that's when panic sets in. They start questioning their decision. They start remembering the good times. They start realizing that maybe, just maybe, they were wrong. But here's where most people fail. They pretend to detach instead of actually detaching. They wait in silence, thinking that if they ignore them for a few days or weeks, it will make the other person miss them. But deep down, they're still waiting, still hoping, still attached. And because energy doesn't lie, the other person can still feel it. Real detachment means you truly shift your focus inward. It means you stop watching the clock, you stop keeping score. You stop wondering when they'll notice your absence and start focusing on yourself. The process of detachment isn't easy. Your mind will play tricks on you. It will try to convince you to reach out. It will tell you that if you don't say something now, they'll forget about you. It will make you believe that silence means indifference. But that's just your fear talking. The reality is, silence speaks louder than words. Distance creates clarity. When you step back, you give them the opportunity to feel your absence in a way that words could never express. Most people fear detachment because they associate it with losing someone for good. They think that if they let go, they're giving up. But detachment is the opposite of giving up. It's choosing yourself over the illusion of control. Because let's be honest, Have you ever truly convinced someone to stay by begging, pleading, or proving your worth? Has chasing ever made them respect you more? No. The only thing that ever makes someone come back is the realization that you are no longer where they left you. And this realization only happens when you detach, when you shift your focus, when you stop waiting for them to return and start living your life as if they never left. It's not about playing games. It's about truly understanding your value. You are not an option. You are not someone to be discarded and picked up when convenient. The moment you internalize this, the moment you genuinely embody it, the moment you stop performing detachment and actually live it, everything changes. When something is always available, it loses its value. This is an undeniable truth in human psychology. People crave what they cannot easily have. The moment something becomes rare, exclusive, or difficult to obtain, it instantly becomes more desirable. This principle applies to everything: money, luxury, opportunities, and most importantly, relationships. If you are always available, always reaching out, always responding instantly, there is no urgency to chase you. There is no reason to fight for your attention because it is already guaranteed. And anything that is guaranteed is taken for granted. Think about the things in life that people work hard for. They chase success because it is not handed to them. They pursue high-status opportunities because they are not easily accessible. They treasure limited edition items because not everyone can have them. The same applies to relationships. If someone feels they have unlimited access to you, they do not feel the need to put in effort. But the moment you remove yourself, the moment your presence becomes scarce, their entire perception of you shifts. They start to wonder where you went. They start to feel the absence of your energy. And that absence creates value. People only appreciate what they believe they might lose. This is why distance is so powerful. When someone is used to your constant presence, when they are used to the idea that you will always be there no matter what, they become complacent. They stop putting in effort. They stop valuing what you bring to the table. But the moment you withdraw, the moment you stop responding the way you used to, their mind starts working against them. They start questioning. They start feeling uncertainty. They start realizing that maybe, just maybe, they underestimated what they had. Human nature is wired for loss aversion. People fear losing something they once believed they had control over. The more someone thinks they have you in their grip, the less effort they put into keeping you. But when that sense of certainty is taken away, when they start to sense that they no longer have the same access to you, they begin to feel anxious. They start thinking about you more than ever before. Not because you begged for their attention, not because you pleaded with them to come back, but because you created a void. And the mind cannot ignore a missing presence. The problem most people face is that they do the opposite. They make themselves too predictable, too available, too accessible. They give and give, thinking that if they just love harder, if they just prove their worth, the other person will realize how valuable they are. But value is not pruned through effort. It is realized through absence. When something is no longer within reach, that's when people start to want it again. Imagine for a moment that you have access to your favorite meal every single day. At first, it's exciting, it's enjoyable. But over time, the excitement fades. It becomes routine. It becomes expected. Now imagine that meal is suddenly taken away. You can no longer have it whenever you want. What happens? You start craving it. You start missing it. You start thinking about how much you took it for granted when it was always available. This is exactly what happens in relationships. When your presence is consistent, it becomes expected. When you pull back, it becomes valuable. The biggest mistake people make when they want someone to come back is thinking that convincing, talking, or proving their worth will make a difference. But words are meaningless when someone feels no urgency to act. It is action, specifically the action of withdrawing, that triggers the mind to reevaluate what was once overlooked. When you remove yourself from someone's life, they are forced to process your absence. They have no choice but to wonder what changed. And that wondering creates curiosity, which leads to desire. But this only works when you are truly willing to walk away. If you make yourself scarce just to manipulate or get a reaction, it will not work. Because deep down, you will still be waiting. And that waiting energy is felt. True scarcity is created when you genuinely shift your focus away from them and onto yourself. When you stop making them the center of your thoughts and start living in a way that no longer revolves around them. This is when they start to feel your absence in a way that words could never express. There's a psychological trigger that happens when someone realizes they might lose something they once took for granted. Their mind starts replaying old memories. They start remembering the little things about you that they overlooked. They start wondering if they made a mistake. And once that thought enters their mind, it is difficult to ignore. They begin to crave what they once dismissed. And suddenly, the dynamic shifts. They start reaching out. They start showing effort. They start trying to re-enter your world, not because you asked them to, but because they now feel the fear of missing out on something that is no longer guaranteed. Emotions are powerful, but when left unchecked, they control you instead of you controlling them. Right now, your emotions might be telling you to react, to call, to text, to chase, to explain, to get closure. Your mind might be flooded with thoughts about what went wrong, what you could have done differently, and whether they are thinking about you. But here's what you need to understand. Emotions create energy, and energy is felt even from a distance. When you act from a place of desperation, fear, or sadness, you project that energy outward. And that energy pushes people away. It tells them that you are still attached, still waiting, still hoping. But when you master emotional control, everything changes. Emotional control does not mean suppressing how you feel. It does not mean pretending to be unbothered when you're really hurting. It means learning how to manage your emotions in a way that benefits you rather than working against you. It means feeling everything, but not letting those feelings dictate your actions. The problem most people face when trying to get someone back is that they react too quickly. They let their emotions drive their behavior. They send impulsive messages. They try to spark a reaction. They overanalyze every small detail. And in doing so, they give away all their power. But power is in restraint. Power is in knowing that just because you feel something does not mean you have to act on it. When you act from a place of emotional instability, you reinforce the idea that you are still emotionally dependent on them. And dependency is never attractive. People are drawn to those who are in control of themselves. There is nothing more powerful than someone who can feel deeply but remain composed. Someone who can love without losing themselves. Someone who can care but still choose themselves first. This is what emotional control looks like. It is the ability to sit with discomfort without seeking instant relief. It is the ability to take a step back and evaluate the bigger picture rather than acting on momentary feelings. The mind plays tricks on you when you're emotional. It makes you believe that if you don't act now, you'll lose them forever. It convinces you that silence means they've moved on. It urges you to seek validation, to check their social media, to send that message. But every time you react emotionally, you reinforce their position of power. You show them that you are still affected, that you are still waiting, that they still have control over your emotions. And as long as they feel that, they will not return. You must learn to sit with your emotions rather than act on them. When you feel the urge to reach out, pause. When you feel the need to check their social media, resist. When you start overanalyzing their actions, shift your focus. This is not about playing games. It is about rewiring your mind to work in your favor rather than against you. Every time you choose self-control over impulsiveness, you reclaim your power. Every time you choose discipline over desperation, you shift the dynamic. You go from being the one chasing to the one being chased. Emotional control is what separates those who get results from those who stay stuck. It is what makes people regret leaving in the first place. Because nothing makes someone question their decision more than realizing you are unaffected by their absence. The moment they sense that you are no longer emotionally tied to them, they begin to feel the weight of their own actions. They start to wonder why you haven't reached out. How can you stay? They start to feel the absence of your energy. And that absence creates discomfort. It forces them to confront their own feelings rather than feeding off of yours. Most people make the mistake of thinking that expressing their emotions will bring someone back. That if they just explain, just open up, just tell them how much they miss them, the other person will suddenly have a change of heart. But this is not how human psychology works. People do not change their minds based on words. They change based on emotions. And the strongest emotion a person can feel is loss. When they sense that you are slipping away, when they realize they no longer have an emotional hold over you, that is when they start to feel regret. That is when they start second-guessing their choices. There works, but none of this works if you're only pretending. You cannot fake emotional control. You cannot trick yourself into detachment while secretly waiting for a reaction. The energy you hold inside will always be felt. That is why true emotional control is an internal process, not an external strategy. It is about actually shifting your mindset, not just acting like you have. It is about genuinely focusing on yourself, your goals, your growth. So much so that their presence or absence no longer dictates your emotional state. That is when you become magnetic. That is when they start to feel your absence in a way they never expected. The energy you carry within yourself is the energy that the world reflects back to you. Every thought, every feeling, and every belief you hold creates a vibration that influences how others perceive and respond to you. This is why detachment is so powerful. It shifts your energy from one of neediness and lack to one of confidence and abundance. When you are emotionally attached to someone, whether consciously or unconsciously, you radiate an energy that says, I need you to validate me. I need your attention. I need your presence to feel whole. That energy repels rather than attracts because no one wants to feel like they are responsible for someone else's emotional well-being. But when you detach, when you remove the emotional weight you've placed on them, everything shifts. Detachment does not mean you stop caring. It does not mean you become cold or indifferent. It means that you reclaim your power by no longer allowing their actions or inactions to dictate your emotional state. It means you recognize that your happiness, your confidence, and your self-worth do not depend on them. This shift is felt even without words. The moment you genuinely detach, the moment you stop seeking validation from them, is the moment they begin to notice. People can feel when they are no longer the center of your world. They can sense when the energy they once received from you has been withdrawn. And that is when curiosity begins to creep in. That is when they start wondering what changed, why you're no longer chasing, and whether they made a mistake. The mistake most people make is trying to use detachment as a tactic rather than a transformation. They tell themselves, I'll ignore them for a few days and see if they come back. But deep down, they are still emotionally tied, still hoping, still waiting. And that energy is felt. You cannot fake detachment. You cannot pretend to move on while secretly refreshing their social media, waiting for a sign. True detachment comes from an internal shift. It comes from realizing that you are the prize. That your life does not revolve around whether or not they return. That you are not losing anything because you are the source of your own happiness. People always want what they feel they can't have. When you were emotionally invested in them, when you were constantly available, they knew they had you. They knew they could walk away and you would still be there, waiting. That certainty gave them power. But detachment removes that certainty. It creates space. It makes them question their own decisions. It forces them to sit with the reality that they may have lost you. And nothing is more powerful than the fear of loss. When you detach, you also regain clarity. You stop viewing them through the lens of your emotions and start seeing them for who they truly are. You begin to ask yourself, were they really as great as I thought? Did they truly add value to my life? Or was I just attached to the idea of them? Emotional attachment often blinds us to reality. It makes us overlook red flags, settle for less, and accept behavior we wouldn't normally tolerate. But detachment brings truth. It allows you to assess the situation without bias. It gives you the space to decide whether you truly want them back or whether you were just caught up in an emotional cycle. Most people think that detachment is difficult because they associate it with loss. But detachment is not about loss. It is about gain. It is about gaining freedom from the emotional chains that kept you stuck. It is about regaining your sense of self-worth. It is about redirecting your energy towards things that actually benefit you rather than wasting it on someone who is unsure about you. And paradoxically, it is this very detachment that makes people return. Because when you are no longer available, when you are no longer seeking, when you are no longer emotionally dependent on them, they start to crave what they once took for granted. Detachment is not passive. It is not about sitting around, doing nothing, and hoping they notice. It is about actively focusing on yourself. It is about pouring all the energy you once gave to them back into yourself. It is about leveling up mentally, emotionally, and physically. It is about becoming so immersed in your own growth that their absence no longer feels like a loss, but rather an opportunity for self-improvement. That shift in focus changes everything. Because the more you invest in yourself, the more attractive you become, not just to them, but to the world. People are drawn to those who are whole within themselves. They are drawn to confidence, to self-assurance, to those who do not need external validation to feel valuable. This is why detachment works. Not because it is a trick, but because it forces you to elevate. It forces you to step into your power. It forces you to become the kind of person who does not beg, who does not chase, who does not wait around for someone to realize their worth. And in doing so, you naturally become more desirable. The dynamic shifts. You go from being the one seeking attention to the one receiving it. You go from being the one waiting for a message to the one whose absence is felt. And when they do return, it is not because you manipulated them. It is because they were drawn back to the strength, the confidence, and the self-assurance that detachment created. When you elevate your energy and shift your focus inward, something remarkable happens. You begin to radiate a different kind of presence. One that is rooted in confidence, self-respect, and certainty. This shift is not just internal. It manifests in everything you do, in the way you carry yourself, in the way you communicate, in the way you engage with the world. People can feel it. They can sense the difference in your energy, in your aura. And nothing is more magnetic than a person who no longer seeks validation from external sources, but instead generates their own sense of worth from within. It is important to understand that energy speaks louder than words. You do not need to tell someone that you have changed. You do not need to announce that you are no longer waiting, that you are no longer desperate, that you are no longer emotionally attached to their approval. They will feel it. They will notice it in the way you respond or don't respond. They will notice it in your silence, in your calmness, in your newfound sense of purpose. When you no longer react emotionally, when you no longer overextend yourself just to gain their attention, when you no longer operate from a place of lack, they begin to wonder what happened. They begin to question why the energy they once took for granted has shifted. And this, more than anything, makes them reflect on their own actions. People are naturally drawn to confidence. Confidence is not about arrogance. It is about self-assurance. It is about knowing who you are, what you bring to the table, and refusing to lower your standards just to keep someone in your life. This kind of confidence cannot be faked. It is not something you put on like a mask. It is something that comes from deep inner work, from truly understanding your worth, from no longer placing your happiness in the hands of another person. When you reach this level of self-awareness, you no longer need to chase. You no longer need to convince anyone to stay, to love you, to choose you, because you understand that you are already complete within yourself. The moment you embody this energy, people begin to take notice. They start to feel the absence of your old self. The version of you that was always available, always waiting, always willing to go the extra mile, even when it was not reciprocated. And when that version of you disappears, when you step into your power, they are left with no choice but to reevaluate the role you played in their life. This is where the shift happens. This is where they begin to see you differently. Not as someone they could always count on to be there, no matter how they treated you, but as someone who is valuable, someone whose presence is a privilege, not a given. It is human nature to want what we feel we can no longer have. When you were constantly available, constantly seeking, constantly trying to make things work, they felt secure in the idea that you would always be there. That security made them complacent. It made them take your presence for granted. But when that security is removed, when you no longer act the way you once did, when you no longer prioritize them over yourself, that is when their perception of you begins to shift. That is when they start to feel the void that your presence once filled. And that void creates desire. This is not about playing games. It is not about manipulation. It is about understanding human psychology. People appreciate what they have to work for. They value what is not easily accessible. When you are constantly giving, constantly available, constantly seeking validation, they never had to question your presence in their life. But when you step back, when you invest in yourself, when you build a life so fulfilling that their absence no longer affects you, they begin to see you in a new light. They begin to wonder what changed, why you are no longer the same, why you are no longer seeking them out the way you once did. And that curiosity, that uncertainty, that realization that you are no longer within their grasp is what creates the desire for them to return. The most powerful thing you can do is to shift your energy from them back to yourself. Pour all the attention, all the love, all the energy that you once directed towards them into yourself. Work on your goals. Refine your mindset. Elevate your lifestyle. Become so immersed in your own growth that you no longer have time to dwell on whether or not they will return. When you do this, you naturally become more attractive, not just to them, but to the world. Because people are drawn to those who have purpose, to those who exude confidence, to those who do not need external validation to feel whole. Most people make the mistake of thinking that they need to do something specific to make someone return. They think they need to send the right message, say the right words, act a certain way. But in reality, the only thing you need to do is shift your energy. The moment you detach emotionally, the moment you reclaim your power, the moment you start living for yourself, because you are no longer coming from a place of neediness. You are no longer trying to force an outcome. You are no longer giving off the energy that repels. Instead, you are embodying the energy that attracts. An energy of abundance, of self-worth, of certainty. This shift does not happen overnight. It requires deep inner work. It requires breaking old patterns, rewiring your mindset, and truly understanding that your value is not determined by someone else's presence in your life. It requires stepping into a new version of yourself. One that no longer seeks, but instead attracts. And when you do this, you will be amazed at how quickly the dynamics shift. Because the moment you stop chasing, the moment you stop waiting, the moment you start truly living for yourself is the moment they begin to notice. And once they notice, once they feel that shift, once they realize that the energy they once took for granted is no longer theirs to claim, they will have no choice but to return. Not because you force them to, but because the energy you now embody leaves them with no other option. When you understand the power of patience, you step into a realm of control that most people never experience. Patience is not passive. It is a quiet, unshakable confidence that things will unfold as they should. It is knowing that you do not need to rush, that you do not need to force anything, that the energy you put out into the world will return to you at the right time. Most people make the mistake of acting out of impatience, of trying to manipulate outcomes, of seeking immediate results. They send messages they should not send. They seek validation when they should be standing firm. They act out of fear instead of faith. But when you truly master patience, you shift from a state of desperation to a state of power. Patience is what separates those who get what they want from those who sabotage their own success. The reason most people fail to get someone to return is because they give in to their emotions too quickly. They feel a moment of weakness and react. They see that the person is not responding and they panic. They check their phone obsessively. They overanalyze every interaction. They let anxiety dictate their actions, and that energy is repelling. It communicates neediness, insecurity, a lack of trust in oneself. But when you are patient, you move differently. You are not frantic. You are not checking your phone every 5 minutes. You are not waiting for a response. You have already decided that the outcome is inevitable. And because of that, you are at peace. The person who has patience always wins because they are not controlled by their emotions. Emotions are temporary. Feelings come and go. What you feel today may not be what you feel a week from now. But if you let those fleeting emotions dictate your actions, you will always be at the mercy of your impulses. You must train yourself to wait, to sit in the discomfort of uncertainty without acting from a place of weakness. The ability to wait without reacting is one of the greatest forms of strength. Because when you do not act from desperation, when you do not seek immediate reassurance, you force the other person to sit with their own emotions instead of responding to yours. And this is where the shift happens. People are conditioned to expect a reaction. They are used to you being available. They are used to knowing that they can reach out on their terms and that you will be there. But when you do not respond the way they expect, when you do not seek them out, when you do not chase, they are left with nothing but their own thoughts. And those thoughts begin to work in your favor. Because instead of feeling secure in your presence, they start to question your absence. They start to wonder why you are not reacting the way they anticipated. They begin to think about you more. Because the brain is naturally drawn to uncertainty. What is predictable is forgettable. But what is uncertain becomes intriguing. When you practice patience, you let time do the work for you. Time is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. It creates space for reflection. It amplifies emotions. It makes people miss what they once took for granted. If you do not give things time to unfold, you rob yourself of the natural effect that time has on human perception. Most people ruin their chances because they act too soon. They feel the need to control the situation instead of allowing things to evolve on their own. They text before the other person has had a chance to feel their absence. They check in before curiosity has been created. But the person who masters patience understands that time is their greatest ally. They do not force, they do not beg, they do not chase. They let time shift the dynamics in their favor. Patience also signals confidence. It communicates that you are in control, that you are not afraid of losing anything because you trust in yourself. The person who is truly confident does not need immediate validation. They do not need constant reassurance. They do not operate from fear. And this kind of energy is rare. Most people are controlled by their emotions. They let fear dictate their actions. But the person who can sit back, who can wait without anxiety, who can continue living their life without needing an immediate response, this is the person who always wins. Because their lack of urgency creates urgency in the other person. When you are patient, you give the other person the space to realize what they lost. You allow them to experience what life feels like without your presence. And this is crucial because people do not appreciate what they have until they no longer have it. If you are always there, if you are always reaching out, if you are always available, they never get the opportunity to truly feel your absence. And without absence, there is no longing. Without longing, there is no desire. But when you step back, when you stop reacting, when you let time create distance, that distance creates curiosity. That curiosity turns into nostalgia. And nostalgia turns into action. Patience also teaches you discipline. It forces you to confront your own impulses, to sit with discomfort instead of reacting to it. This is where real growth happens. Because patience is not just about waiting, it is about what you do while you wait. It is about how you carry yourself, how you invest in yourself, how you elevate your mindset in the meantime. The person who waits passively will not get the same results as the person who waits with purpose. Because the goal is not just to wait for someone to return. It is to become so valuable, so self-assured, so magnetic in the process that when they do return, they are met with someone far more powerful than the person they left. Patience allows you to shift the dynamic in your favor. It places you in the position of power. Because when you are not in a rush, when you are not desperate for an outcome, you make better decisions. You see things more clearly. You operate from a place of strength rather than weakness. And this changes everything. Because the person who is patient does not need to chase. They do not need to seek validation. They do not need to force anything. They simply let time do what time does best. Create clarity, create longing, create a shift in perception. And when that shift happens, when the other person finally realizes what they had, it is already too late for them to take you for granted.